23 February. I went into the laboratory as usual this morning. Imagine my surprise to find my assistant, Gronk, on the floor, quite dead. I have been patching it together pretty often in the past few years, and it was bound to die for good, sooner or later. But I was quite taken aback. I could find nothing of its patched-together body worth saving. Poor creature, so I dragged its corpse to my acid vat and covered it with the best nitric. When it was dissolved, I admit I shed a tear as I added the slaked lime to neutralize the acid. Into the sewers it went, except for a flask I kept as a keepsake. I think Gronk would have wanted it this way. Now, to construct a new assistant. 24 February. I think I know where to get the makings of an assistant. I am an adjunct instructor at the local university, and when I looked over today's class of burnout graduate students, I had an inspiration. Most of them have tolerably healthy bodies and good brains. If I could incite a few to suicide, I could construct a replacement for Gronk out of the bits and pieces. I recall some work I did on a device to generate despair. If I can find my old notes, I might be able to do something with this. 25 February. Very tired. I spent the day building the despair generator. There is a suitable area on campus, high dorm buildings, and laboratories full of grad students, which should yield some useful self-defenestrations. Tomorrow night, I will strike. 27 February. Success! I installed the despair generator atop a high laboratory building near the graduate dorms. It worked by inducing the appropriate brainwaves in the subjects. In the evening, I started it by remote control. In a few seconds, a feeling of utmost depression and uselessness swept over me, which I was able to resist only because I knew it to be artificial. That, and through my iron will. After a minute or so, windows in the lab towers and dorms started to open, grad students to climb out, and their bodies to fall to the ground like so many autumn leaves. I darted out from my hiding place in a clump of bushes and harvested parts of brain from several bodies, gathering plenty before anyone else arrived. An entire brain would have been better, but I did not want to arouse suspicion. The other parts of the body are less critical and can be obtained by a little assiduous grave robbing. 28 February. I have pieced together a working brain from the bits and pieces I so hurriedly harvested. A very nice job I made of it. Now for the grave robbing. I wish that people wouldn't waste money on embalming. It makes these things so much more difficult. I look at myself in the mirror today. I am really getting fat and out of shape. It strikes me that I had been letting poor Gronk do all the physical work around here. I must find some way of getting fit again, a device for bodily metamorphosis. I hate physical exercise. It will not be easy digging up those parts for a new assistant. 2nd March. Recovered at last from the physical and mental exhaustion involving the grave robbing and reviving parts. All last night I was wishing for the strength of Gronk at my side. But of course, were he still alive, there would be no need to procure body parts. The cold weather had slowed decomposition, but the ground was still hard, even over the fresh graves. I was barely able to dig up 3 fresh young corpses and harvest the better parts. By the time I had the 3rd coffin open, I was trembling from sheer fatigue. Somehow, I filled in the graves again, got the parts home and in the proper solutions. 3rd March. A nice leisurely day hooking bits and pieces of bodies together. All of the parts are from male bodies and they fit together rather well. The cranial cavity needed a bit of work to hold the patchwork brain, but not much. I don't see reanimation as being very difficult in this case. 4 March. I started the reanimation this morning. Everything is going well so far. The old equipment that got Gronk up and about is still in excellent shape, though it looks a bit quaint. I looked through my old notes on bodily metamorphosis. I'd forgotten how far I had progressed. The biggest problem was storing information about the new structure the body is assuming. Making a human or animal into a duplicate of another was practical, giving the presence of the original. But I have no penchant for impersonation. Had I been willing to prostitute my genius to commercial ends, and been able to find a discreet clientele, I could have made several fortunes by changing old women into twin sisters of their pretty granddaughters, vain women into copies of fashion models, would-be transsexuals. Bah! Foolishness. 5th March. My new assistant is definitely alive, already healing with that unnatural speed that still amazes even me. Its body does not look scarred or particularly deformed. A good job. It should wake up within a few days, and given the quality of its brain, it might even be coherent by then. Training Gronk was quite a task, but I have hope for better things this time. 6 March. Altogether an amazing and gratifying day. I went into the lab today and found my new assistant sitting up in bed. "What happened to me?" it asked. And, "This sounds crazy, but who am I?" After a moment of gathering my wits, I told it a carefully edited version of the truth, omitting anything that might hint that I had anything to do with the deaths of the persons from whom I constructed it. It was quite grateful, happy to be alive, and oddly excited about being an assistant to what it calls a mad scientist. As far as its scrambled brain can recollect, it was unhappy and burnt out as graduate students, dissatisfied with its work and its advisors. Most of it was computer scientists and electrical engineers. Not what I would have chosen. Why didn't I check before inducing those suicides? But it seems intelligent and obedient, and I admit that my knowledge of computers is slight and outdated. Not as strong as Gronk either. We agreed to call it, or I suppose I would start saying him, Fred. 7 March. Fred is a wonder. Apart from his lack of physical strength, not greatly stronger than I am, tall and gawky and spindly, he is much superior to Gronk. We had a look at my bodily metamorphosis equipment, which I keep down in the caves beneath my laboratory, amongst my older apparatus. I explained the problem of storing body images. How can you transform a body without the original to provide a template? What if you want to make only a few alterations? You need a computer master, he told me. I took him to my computer complex and showed him my IBM 360. He laughed for an entire minute and said that it would never do. He says that he can get something running on it, but that I will have to buy a newer machine if I want to do any serious work. Fortunately, I have vast sums in my Swiss bank accounts, thanks to some consulting work for various individuals and governments, and the estimate Fred gives me for what we will need is quite reasonable. 9. March. Very busy, both of us. It is quite different having an intelligent assistant with the minds of grad students, more expensive to begin with. Fred lives on Twinkies and Coke Classic and delivered pizza, when poor Gronk was satisfied with gruel and the occasional blind cavefish. The pizza delivery men are quite afraid of my house, what with the permanent fog and thunderclouds I generate around it. And it takes large tips to keep the pizza coming. Also, Fred does not obey orders blindly, but thinks first. This could be a problem when I need a special job done, but it should prevent certain blunders, such as when Gronk handed me the wrong brain and instead of putting my old lady colleague into the beautiful co-ed's body, I put in an aging prostitute. The prostitute disgraced the body somewhat before I could put things right, but eventually I got Julia's brain into that darling, empty little head. She, now known by her body's name of Tiffany, is still stunning, publishes voluminously, and is happily married. But with Fred there, everything would have gone smoothly. Fred says that the 360 should be able to handle a small metamorphosis and that we could store the body patterns on magnetic tape, about 50 reels of it. Not enough memory, too slow, can't do computer-aided design of bodies, master. I gave him carte blanche as to equipment and have placed the necessary orders. Seeing Fred struggling with the ancient 360 and still getting results has given me faith in his abilities. 12. March. No entries for a few days, but we have a success. Fred and I are not strong enough to move the metamorphosis equipment, so he ran data lines down into the caves. We scanned a small blind newt native to the caves, putting the pattern of its body onto magnetic tape. 46 reels, but the tape drive handles only low densities. Then we captured a cavefish and read the newt's pattern off the tape. The metamorphosis seemed to work, but when it was complete and we took the restraints off the new newt, it scurried off down the cave, eventually falling into one of the cracks in the floor that go down to volcanic fire. When Fred saw this, he laughed uproariously for a long time, explaining later that it reminded him of something in some of his former lives. 14. March. It's amazing what a bit of bribery will do. Our new computers are already here, to Fred's amazement, and he is hard at work installing them. He says that we will be able to do computer-aided design of our new body forms, store and edit body patterns, and perform remarkable transformations. I have great confidence in him. The amount of Coke Classic he consumes is remarkable. Whenever I warn him that it may endanger the health of his reanimated body, he shrugs and opens another can. 15. March. Fred is tireless, it seems. Most of the machines are up, though the machine room is littered with pizza scraps and empty Coke Classic cans. I sense that he has an ulterior motive for working so hard. Is he unhappy with his body? The scarring is minimal. He assures me that no part of him is in pain, and he could easily pass for a normal human being. I decide to let him become whoever he likes once the process is perfected, as a reward for his assiduous labors. 16. March. I am rebuilding the metamorphosis bed while Fred works on software for designs and control. He is using an existing CAD package that I bought at enormous expense, but he says it will save him months of work. 17 March. The equipment is ready, but Fred says that the software will take a while, perhaps a week. I cannot accuse him of malingering. He is working up to 20 hours a day, hardly eating, and writing vast amounts of code. He suggested over Coke Classic during one of the breaks that I occupy myself with other things while he finishes this difficult project. Very bored, I captured a stray dog and metamorphosed it into a copy of my cat, but my heart wasn't in it, though the new cat is delightfully confused. I needed something else to work on. 18 March. Very melancholy. I bother Fred, keeping him from his work. I long for a wife, typical of me when I'm unoccupied. There is a pleasant but homely young woman named Catherine in the course I am teaching at the university. She appears to be interested in me. When the metamorphosis equipment is working, I can make my body strong and attractive, and once she is in love with me, alter her suitability. She has just the sort of mind, I believe, that would fit nicely in the sort of body I find beautiful. 24 March. No entries for a while. I cannot work. I drove to town, car and self properly disguised, and picked up a whore. She was appallingly stupid and ill-mannered, and I lost patience with her before we could even have sex. I took her home, used the proper equipment, and now have a second copy of my cat. If she is well behaved, I will forge a copy of my cat's pedigree papers and sell her for a good price. With only a cat's brain, she is hardly in a position to incriminate me. Fred says that he is almost finished. The bill for delivered pizza is astronomical, but when I complain, he justly notes that the computers were far more expensive.
Master, suggested Fred, why don't you build a portable body scanner so that you can copy people without kidnapping them?
Fred is getting a bit above his station, I thought angrily, but by now I am starting to see him more as a colleague than a creature. Of course, his suggestion is excellent. He will have to build the data storage mechanism, but today I put the rest of the works into the case of a video camera. People will think that I am taking videos when in fact I am copying the patterns of their bodies onto video cassettes as binary data. Most amusing. 27 March. A very rewarding day indeed. I went to a downtown park with my video camera and filmed several attractive young women as they ate lunch. One 8mm video cassette stores enough data to let me reconstruct a human body, and the scanner runs through it in half a minute. Perhaps I aroused their suspicions, what with changing tapes after less than a minute of use, but I pretended that the camera was malfunctioning. Back in the lab, I took the copycat that had been the stray dog, strapped it into the metamorphosis bed, and gave Fred a tape of a lovely brunette. In a few minutes, we had the process going quite nicely, and in less than an hour, the body of the young woman lay there, nicely shaped, charming with its frilly dress and long hair and careful makeup, all exactly as I had scanned it. The mind of the dog was quite confused at this second change of form, and incapable of handling the complexities of a human brain and body. It lay there, a stunned expression on its pretty face, moaning softly, still an animal inside. I caressed it in ways that would have invoked at least a severe slap from its original, but it just whimpered. I was not at all tempted to have sex with the lovely body the dog now wore, though, with someone like Catherine looking out of those eyes, I would not have even hesitated. I offered it to Fred, but he declined. Strange, because he seemed aroused by the sight of it. Something is peculiar about Fred. I suppose I will soon know just what. After a quick physical examination of the body, simply that of a healthy young woman, I found, we changed it back into a cat's. As for cats, the former whore makes a superb one. She knows how to use a toilet, likes being cuddled, and is quite even-tempered. I will sell my original cat and keep her instead. 28 March. It was bound to happen. Fred has cracked. I came down to the lab this morning. Fred was in his quarters with the door open. He had put an old mirror he must have found in the caves, and was preening himself before it in woman's clothing. Once I had overcome my initial shocked amusement, I questioned him and found that 1. Part of his brain had come from a woman. 2. Another part had come from a would-be transsexual. 3. I should be pleased that he could not merely extract clothing from the body scans, but scale it up to fit him. And 4. He would like to become a woman as soon as possible, and would have already changed had he considered it safe and practical to operate the equipment alone. I was at a loss. A female assistant would be quite distracting, I told him. Pressure of overwork had caused him to crack. He didn't really want to be a woman, did he? I forbade him to attempt a change of body without my permission, or even wear female garb. He sulked and said that it was his desire for womanhood that impelled him to finish the job in a fraction of the time he would normally have spent. I remembered my promise to myself to let Fred be who he wished, and reluctantly told him that if he still felt that way in a few days, he could change. He was grateful and immediately put on proper clothes and got to work. The pet store paid an excellent price for my original cat. The transmuted whore is much superior. 29 March. Fred furtively fondles a pair of black lace panties, but otherwise is holding to his cooling off period. He's improving the CAD software considerably, and this afternoon designed a body that looks quite like that of Diana Rigg as Emma Peel on The Avengers. It would be most distracting to have such an assistant, but I suppose that I can tolerate it if Fred does not suggest I impersonate Patrick McNee as John Steed. We scanned my body. Tomorrow I plan to do a bit of editing and assume a more athletic form. 30 March. Written in a smaller, delicate script. I am greatly annoyed. Fred swears that it was not his fault, and fortunately for him, he is right. I was careless. Still, I am certain he considers this poetic justice, after I delayed his change of sex. At present, I have the body of a tiny but flawlessly beautiful child woman, perhaps 16. I am too disgusted at my femininity to give more details. The computer is down, so that return to a proper form will have to wait until we can get a repairman here. We had edited a scan of my body, reducing its age by a few years, removing fat, adding muscle, and so forth. The computer began giving warning messages on its console about potential hardware error, but I, hoping to impress Catherine in class tomorrow with my physique, wearing, for once, a t-shirt instead of a coat and tie, insisted on going ahead with my alteration. Then I put into the drive what I thought was the proper tape had Fred strap me into the metamorphosis bed and let myself be changed. The metamorphosis takes place with the subject conscious but paralyzed and insensible of pain. I could tell that I was changing too much, but was powerless to stop that. Fred was afraid to interrupt the process. When the change was complete, Fred, embarrassed, handed me a mirror. Though furious and disgusted, I looked adorable. This made me even angrier. I minced, damning my new body over to the console, found the correct tape, and put it into the drive. Fred ran a setup program and the machine crashed. Diagnostics showed a major hardware failure which Fred could not repair, even if you were willing to void the warranty. I tore my dress to ribbons in my anger. Fred told me that he had designed the body for his own occasional use and offered me clothes from the extensive wardrobe he had already created for it. They ranged from little girl to happy hooker, but all were intensely feminine and delicately perfumed. I tried to strike Fred, but he gently restrained me. Eventually, I resigned myself to the situation and a blouse and skirt.